In the first episode of the Unsaid Podcast, we're exploring why being the talented one so often turns into a life of quiet pressure, overthinking, and that constant, invisible feeling of falling behind, no matter how hard you try. If reading helps you stay grounded while you take this in, subtitles are right here for you. You were the one they never worried about. While other kids needed tutoring, pushing, discipline, you just knew. You picked things up fast. You made it look easy. You were the bright one, the gifted one, the kid with promise. So they stopped checking in on you. They assumed you'd figure it out, that someone like you would be fine. And for a while, you were. You were always a little ahead. You could write the paper the night before and still get an A. You barely studied and still topped the class. You got used to the glow of being praised for your potential, before you even understood what that word really meant. But now you feel behind. Not just behind schedule, but behind yourself. It's like everyone else grew up while you were stuck in place. They have careers, partners, stability. You have pressure, shame, the quiet hum of guilt that never really goes away. You keep wondering, what happened to me? Why do I still feel like a draft version of who I was supposed to be? And the scariest part? You still feel like that talented kid inside. But now it just makes the gap harder to bear. Because if you were so gifted, why do you feel like you're falling behind in a life that was supposed to come easy? This video isn't about failure. It's about the kind of success that silently slips away because you never learned how to build what you were once handed. If that's you, you're not alone. Let's talk about why the thing that made you special might be the very thing holding you back. You thought talent was a gift, but what if it was a disguise? See, here's what no one tells you about being the talented one. You weren't praised for trying. You were praised for performing, for making it look effortless, for skipping steps, for being impressive without ever being seen. And that praise, it taught you something dangerous. That your value isn't in your effort, it's in your output. It's in being naturally good, instantly competent, always a little ahead. So now, you don't just fear failure, you fear being seen trying. Because trying means risking proof that you're not who they said you were. Not the prodigy, not the exception, just human. And here's the trap. The smarter you were, the fewer tools you were given. Because when everything came easy, you never had to learn how to build grit, manage doubt, tolerate confusion, or ask for help. Struggle was never normalized for you. It was pathologized. So now, when life requires those things, persistence, patience, humility, you feel unequipped. And instead of saying, "No one taught me how," you say, "Something must be wrong with me." And it's not just psychological, it's cultural. Our systems reward talent, not development. Our schools give attention to the struggling or the average, but the gifted, they're left alone, assumed to be fine. They become spectators of their own decline, silently wondering why it's getting harder to play the role they were assigned. That's the contradiction. The talent that once opened doors now shuts them. Because it created a version of you that was never allowed to be uncertain, slow, or messy. But that version was never real to begin with. By now, you've probably told yourself 1,000 versions of the same story. I just need more discipline, more consistency. I need to stop being lazy. But that's not the loop you're actually stuck in. Here's what's really happening. Talented kids grow up learning to avoid effort. Not because they're lazy, but because effort felt like proof they weren't good enough. That wiring doesn't just disappear. It becomes your operating system. So when adult life finally requires effort, when relationships get complex, when careers get uncertain, when real learning gets hard, your brain panics. Not because you're weak, but because struggle was never normalized for you. It was shamed. And here's the kicker. Research backs this up. Carol Dweck's studies on fixed versus growth mindset found that kids praised for intelligence were more likely to avoid challenges and give up faster when tasks became hard, compared to kids praised for effort. Their sense of worth was fragile. It crumbled under pressure. Sound familiar? Neuroscience takes it further. A study from Columbia found that children who were consistently praised for being smart showed increased activation in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, when facing failure. In other words, your brain learned to interpret difficulty not as a puzzle to solve, but as a threat to your identity. So what happens next? You procrastinate. You self-sabotage. You wait until the last minute to avoid the discomfort of starting, because if you never fully try, you never fully fail. And that becomes the loop. Avoid the thing, feel behind, panic, avoid harder, question your worth. It's not a lack of motivation. It's self-protection, disguised as perfectionism. And the longer you stay in it, the more convinced you become that you're broken. When really, you're just stuck in a pattern no one helped you name. Here's what no one told you. And maybe no one ever will unless you hear it right now. You were never broken. You were undersupported. You weren't too sensitive. You just noticed more. You weren't too much. You were wired for depth in a world that rewards surface. Being gifted wasn't your mistake. Being praised for what you could produce instead of who you were becoming, that's what left the damage. You were a kid who needed guidance, not pressure, encouragement, not expectation, a roadmap, not a pedestal, and without it, you adapted. You became the self-starter, the overthinker, the emotionally self-contained problem solver, the person who always looked fine because breaking down didn't feel like an option. But here's the truth. The things you did to survive, that was intelligence, emotional intelligence, pattern recognition, strategic withdrawal, intuitive analysis. Your giftedness never left. It just turned inward. It became overthinking instead of exploration, self-monitoring instead of self-expression, perfectionism instead of play. You weren't doing it wrong. You were protecting something precious, the part of you that never wanted to let anyone down. The part that believed, if I just figure it out on my own, maybe I'll still be worthy. But you don't need to do it alone anymore. You don't need to trade your gifts for approval. You just need to bring them home, back to yourself. Not to impress, not to outperform, but to be with. Because giftedness isn't a burden when it's grounded in safety. When it's led by curiosity instead of fear, when it's allowed to be fully human. You were never too much. You were just never given enough space. Here's something no one tells you when you're stuck. You don't need to transform your life. You just need to interrupt the pattern. Once. And then, do it again. Gently. Quietly. Like tapping on the glass of an old habit and whispering, hey, we don't have to do it this way anymore. That's how it starts. So here's one pattern-breaking phrase I want you to try. Maybe even write it down. I can treat this like a game. Not a performance, not a test, not a final exam, a game. You don't have to win the day. You just have to play differently. Once. Feel like you're not good enough in a conversation? Try being a character, the curious one, the low-stakes listener, the clueless but kind intern. Get stuck in perfectionism before starting something? Tell yourself, I'm just doing the tutorial level. No one masters a game in the first 10 minutes. This is your practice round. You're allowed to experiment. You're allowed to play. And here's the best part. You can forget and remember again. You can fall back into old roles, the fixer, the overachiever, the overthinker, and then at any moment whisper, wait, I'm allowed to do this differently. That's the whole micropath. Not to force change, but to make room for it. One moment at a time. Try this too. Let yourself rest without earning it. Let yourself start without being ready. Let yourself be seen before you feel perfect. Because giftedness doesn't need to be hidden. It just needs to feel safe being messy, incomplete, human. And the smallest shift isn't in your productivity. It's in your permission. I can treat this like a game. Say it again, and see who you become when you stop trying to be right and start letting yourself be real. If this hit you somewhere deep, that's not an accident. It's because this was never just about talent. It was about finally naming the part of you that's been quietly aching for years, wondering why life feels heavier than it should, why success feels so far away, why you've always felt a few steps off from everyone else. Now, you know. It wasn't because you failed. It wasn't because you're broken. It's because you were trying to live as a finished product instead of a full person. You were gifted, yes, but no one showed you what to do with a gift when it starts to feel like a cage. Now you have a new story. One where effort isn't failure. One where rest isn't laziness. One where trying isn't shameful. It's powerful. And maybe, for the first time, you don't feel so alone in that story. If this helped you see something you've been struggling to name, tell me. If a line hit, if a truth landed, if you felt like, this is me, this is my life, leave a comment. I read them all. I mean that. You don't have to write anything poetic, just something honest. Because the more we say it out loud, the more this stops being a private pain and starts becoming a shared understanding. You're not too late. You're not too far gone. You were never meant to be flawless, just real. And you are. Right now. Exactly as you are. Thank you for being here. Truly. We'll talk again soon.